So, to recap what we did in the last episode first, in the last episode, we made sure that each and every single attribute was a single valued attribute. So we split up name into first name and last name, and address into a street address, a street number, a zip code, and a town. Now, the attributes that we have chosen to put into our entity called employees, they already achieve second normal form. What the second normal form actually tells us is that if we did not have the employee ID and relied instead on a composite primary key called first name, last name, and perhaps a street address, then we would need to make sure that all of these composite candidate keys that we've chosen, that they are wholly reliant on one another. So for instance, we could not say that only the first name and last name would work as a primary key because perhaps there is somebody else named Martin Bagpipe. But once we do Martin Bagpipe and Swan Lane, perhaps there's only one. Maybe there's only two houses on this street. So this is a bad example of a primary key. We would need to put in the street number as well to get a full functioning unique primary key. But what we want to make sure is that each and every single one of these attributes that we choose to put into a composite primary key, that they rely on one another to create a unique primary key. That being said, if you are using composite primary keys, there is a reason to use it sometimes, but more often than not, it's easier for you to just create a primary key such as employee ID in this case, which will uniquely identify your employees instead of having to rely on a first name, last name, street address, and a street number. So that being said about this second normal form, we're going to go straight into the third normal form, which is something that we incidentally created when we did the first normal form. So as you can see, we got the attributes of employee ID, we got the first name, a last name, a street address, a street number, a zip code, and a town. Now, what the third normal form tells us is that we do not want to be storing redundant information within our entities. Now, this might not be noticeable when you have 100 entries or maybe 1,000 entries, but the bigger the database is going to grow, the more memory is going to get chewed up by redundant information that we do not have a need for. So if we look at our entity, we can see that, well, employee ID, it's reliant and wholly on itself. A first name, you can search your first name. Just by searching the first name, you're going to get a bunch of Martins from a database. Bagpipe, perhaps that's a popular last name, and you got to get a bunch of Bagpipe people. Swan Lane is a street with at least 55 other houses on it, so you got to get a bunch of different people. Now, when it comes to a zip code, we see that a zip code is made to uniquely identify a town. So here we have a problem. We have a zip code within our entity, and then we also have the town that the zip code is actually pointing to, which means that we should break this up if we want to adhere to the third normal form. Otherwise, we're going to be storing zip code and town in each and every single one of our employees. Now, this means that if somebody moves, maybe they say they move to zip code, I don't know, 99, 112, then you need to also change the town each and every single time. And it might not be easy for you to just walk around and change two things all the time and keep track of that. Not to mention all of the duplicate information that you're going to save because of the fact that you already know that the zip code is this town. So by creating a database that you want to adhere to the third normal form, it means that you need to separate these two attributes, zip code and town, into their own entity. Now, we're going to do that by creating, as you can see here on the left side, I've already created a table that says zip codes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to alter my table, employees, and I'm going to drop column town. There we go. And then we can look so that it actually went through. There we go. So you see that I removed the town part over here. And now we got a zip code that says 72918. Now, if we were to select everything from zip codes instead, you can see that we only have two entries in here, and one is the zip code, the other one is the town. So by expanding on these on your left side, oh, right, I only show you the keys over here. I'm sorry. There we go. So by showing the columns, you'll see that we have the black key, which is a primary key. And then we have a bunch of attributes, and then we have a white key, which is a foreign key. Now, this foreign key points to zip codes. So I say that wherever the value I put into this zip code in our employees, that's going to reference a value in the table known as zip codes, which is going to tell me that we want to look at the town of London. And after we have done this, our database now successfully and wholly live up to the third normal form. So make sure that you try to avoid composite keys. If you need composite keys, then make sure that they are wholly dependent on one another to create a unique ID. If there is some element in your primary key that's not needed, or if there's some element that is not needed for it to be uniquely ID'd, then you need to rethink your strategy on the second normal form. And when it comes to the third normal form, it's all about making sure that you have no candidate keys that's going to reference something within your entity. So make sure that you remove stuff that have a unique ID attached to it. That being said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.